You open your eyes. It is dark, not the dark of a room with the lights off, not the dark of a moonless night in the countryside. This is a deeper dark, a dark with no bottom to it. A dark that is not the absence of light that was recently there, but the absence of light that has not been there for a very long time. You are in Uranus, or rather, you are in the atmosphere of Uranus. And the atmosphere of Uranus is blue-green and enormous and dark because the pole you have arrived near has not seen the sun in years. 42 years of night. That is how long the pole of Uranus spends in darkness. The planet is tilted almost completely on its side, rotating like a ball rolling along the ground, rather than spinning like a top. And the consequence of this is that each pole spends half of Uranus's orbit pointed away from the sun. Half of Uranus's orbit is 42 Earth years. You have arrived at the dark pole. The sun is somewhere. It exists. It is burning, as it always burns. But from where you are, it might as well not exist. The sky in every direction is the same deep blue-green dark, the color of Uranus's atmosphere, even in daylight, but now without any light to make it visible. Just a darkness that has weight to it. A darkness you can almost feel pressing against you from every direction. You breathe. The cold enters you before the dark does. -224 degrees Celsius. The coldest planetary atmosphere in the solar system. Not because Uranus is furthest from the sun. Neptune is further. Neptune is colder by distance, but Uranus is colder by temperature, and no one fully understands why. Uranus is a mystery. You are inside the mystery now. Uranus is the forgotten planet. Not forgotten the way Pluto is forgotten. Demoted and discussed and argued over. Forgotten in a quieter way. Passed over. When people list the planets of the solar system, Uranus comes between Saturn and Neptune, and most people move through it quickly, on the way to somewhere else. It does not have Saturn's rings. It does not have Jupiter's scale. It does not have Mars's history of human imagination. It sits in the outer solar system, blue-green and featureless from a distance, and most of the time nobody thinks about it very much. Only one spacecraft has ever visited Uranus. Voyager 2, in January 1986. It flew past in a matter of hours, taking photographs and collecting data, and then continued on toward Neptune and eventually out of the solar system entirely. The encounter lasted about 6 hours. Yet in those 6 hours, Voyager 2 sent back everything humanity currently knows about Uranus from up close. Everything. The entire close-up portrait of the seventh planet comes from 6 hours in 1986. No spacecraft has been back since. Uranus sits out there, 2.9 billion kilometers from the sun, tilted on its side, cycling through its 84-year orbit, spending 42 years with one pole toward the sun and 42 years with that same pole in complete darkness, and the universe does not require anyone to pay attention to it. You are going to pay attention to it now. You are going to pay very close attention. In this story, you are in the atmosphere of Uranus. The dark pole is below you. The sun has not touched this part of the planet in years, and the cold is the deepest cold in the solar system. The dark here is not what you expected. You expected the dark of space, the absolute black between stars, the dark of the vacuum. But you are not in the vacuum. You are inside a planet's atmosphere. The atmosphere of Uranus is real and dense and present around you. It is just dark, very, very dark. There is a difference between darkness and the absence of light. The darkness of a room with no windows is the absence of light in a space that contains things. You cannot see the things, but they are there. The chair, the wall, the floor. The darkness of Uranus's night pole is different because the things that are here are not the same kind of things. You are inside a gas. The gas goes in every direction to depths you cannot measure. And in this gas there is nothing to bump into, nothing solid, nothing with edges. The darkness is uninterrupted in a way that indoor darkness never is. You move your hand in front of your face. You cannot see it. You know it is there. You can feel your arm moving, feel the slight resistance of the thick, cold atmosphere against your fingers. But you cannot see your hand. The darkness is complete enough that the difference between your hand being there and not being there is not visible, only feelable. This is what 42 years of night does. It removes the visual world entirely. Everything that exists here exists only as touch, as pressure, as the physical information that reaches you through means other than light. The atmosphere pushes against you from every side. You feel your own breathing. You feel the specific sensation of extreme cold finding its way through every layer between it and your skin. These things are real and present and felt. They are simply not seen. You look up. Stars. Very faint. Dimmed by the atmosphere above you. But there. The stars of the outer solar system. Visible even through this dark sky. Because the atmosphere of Uranus, while dark, is not opaque. It is blue-green gas, and in the absence of any other light source, the faint starlight filters through it and reaches you. Not enough to see by, but enough to know the stars are there. The color of Uranus is blue-green. You cannot see this now because there is no light. But the color is real. It comes from methane in the upper atmosphere. Methane absorbs red light and reflects blue and green wavelengths back. The result in sunlight is a pale cyan, an almost artificial-looking color, the kind of color you might choose if you were designing a planet and wanted it to look unlike anything else. In 42 years, when the sun returns to this pole, the sky will be that color. Right now, it is the color of a darkness so complete that color has no meaning. You need to understand something about Uranus before you can understand where you are. Every planet in the solar system spins. Earth spins like a top, with its axis pointed roughly toward Polaris, tilted about 23 degrees from vertical. Mars spins almost the same way. Jupiter and Saturn are tilted only slightly, but Uranus is tilted 98 degrees. 98 degrees means it rotates on its side. Picture a ball spinning on a table. Normal planets spin like that. Now, tip the ball so it spins with its equator pointing upward. Its poles to the left and right rather than top and bottom. That is Uranus. It rolls around the sun rather than spinning as it goes. The poles face the sun directly at different points in the orbit. The equator, which on a normal planet would receive the most sunlight, receives the least. Now, this means something specific for where you are. You are near the pole that is currently facing away from the sun. Not slightly away, directly away, completely away. The pole you are near has been in night for decades and will remain in night for more decades. The sun will not rise here. There is no concept of the sun rising here right now. The sun is simply in the wrong direction and will stay in the wrong direction for years. Knowing this changes how the dark feels. On Earth, darkness is temporary. You know the sun is coming. You know that the night has an end and the end has a name, and the name is morning. The darkness of Uranus's night pole has no morning coming. Not for decades. The darkness is not temporary. It is the season. A season measured not in months but in years. And a season so long that generations of humans have lived and died within its span. You are inside a season. The season is night. The night lasts 42 years. No one has experienced this before. Every human who has ever lived has experienced the same rhythm of day and night, the same 24-hour cycle, the same relationship between darkness and the sun that will return. Even people at Earth's poles who experience weeks of darkness in winter know that the sun will come back. Even the deepest winter night on Earth has a mathematical end. The darkness of Uranus's pole is different in kind, not just in degree. It is a darkness without a morning in any time scale a human life can contain. You cannot wait it out. You cannot simply endure it until it ends. Negative 224 degrees Celsius. This number is the coldest temperature recorded in any planetary atmosphere in the solar system. Not the coldest place in the solar system. The surface of Pluto is colder. The dark craters of Mercury are colder, but those are surfaces. The atmosphere of Uranus, the air of a planet, is colder than the air of any other planet anywhere, and no one fully understands why. Neptune is further from the sun. Neptune should be colder. Neptune receives less sunlight. By simple distance calculation, Neptune's atmosphere should be the coldest. But Neptune's atmosphere is warmer than Uranus's, because Neptune generates its own internal heat, the same way Jupiter and Saturn do. Heat from the compression and cooling of the planet's interior, radiating outward and warming the atmosphere from below. Uranus does not do this. Uranus radiates almost no internal heat. Its interior is cold in a way that the other gas and ice giants are not. Scientists have proposed explanations. Perhaps something struck Uranus long ago, a collision large enough to reshape its tilt, and this collision also somehow disrupted the planet's internal heat flow. Perhaps a layer of some material in the interior traps the heat and prevents it from reaching the surface. No one knows for certain. Uranus is cold for reasons that are not yet understood. The cold reaches you in layers. First the skin, then through the skin, into the tissue beneath, then deeper. The cold of this atmosphere does not wait. It does not probe for weaknesses. It simply moves inward along the temperature gradient, from the cold outside toward the warm inside, following the same physics that governs heat everywhere. Heat flows from hot to cold. You are the hot. Everything around you is the cold. The direction of flow is clear. Your breath condenses immediately. You cannot see it in the dark, but you feel the warmth of it on your face for a fraction of a second before it freezes and disperses. Each breath is a small exchange. Warmth out, nothing in. Your body producing heat and the atmosphere accepting it and giving nothing back. There is something particular about not being able to see the cold. On Mercury, you watch the shadows. On Mars, you watch the temperature swing. On Saturn, you watched your breath mist briefly in the ring vacuum. Here, the cold arrives without a visual. It is just there, moving through you in the dark. You know it is happening because you feel it. The specific cellular information of tissue losing heat. But you cannot see it happening, and the inability to see it makes it harder to measure, harder to hold at the right distance. The cold of Uranus is invisible. It is present. It is very thorough. You feel the wind before you understand what it is. A pressure from one side. Strong, consistent, not the gentle push of Saturn's upper atmosphere or the river flow of Jupiter's jet streams. A solid, sustained force against your left side, pushing you sideways through the dark. You cannot see what is around you. You cannot see where the wind is taking you. You just feel it, the enormous invisible hand of Uranus's atmosphere, moving you. The winds on Uranus reach 900 kilometers per hour, in the right bands of the atmosphere, not everywhere. The winds vary by altitude and by latitude, the planet's complex atmospheric dynamics producing regions of very fast flow and regions of slower movement. You are in a fast region. The air pressing against you has a density and a speed that translates into force, and the dense cold gas of the outer solar system moving at a speed that would be catastrophic on Earth. But you do not feel it as catastrophic. You feel it as movement. In the dark, without reference points, the wind defines your experience. It tells you where you are in the atmosphere. It tells you that the atmosphere is moving, that the planet is not still, despite the darkness, that Uranus is doing what planets do even in the polar winter, even without sunlight to drive weather, even after years of night. The wind is proof that Uranus is alive in its own cold way, not alive as a living thing, alive as a system that has been running for 4.5 billion years without requiring sunlight or warmth or any of the things that living things require. That the physics of a rotating mass in space produces wind and weather without needing any outside encouragement. Uranus whines because Uranus spins, and Uranus spins because it has always spun. Because the same rotation that was in the dust cloud that formed the solar system was preserved in the planet that formed from that dust. The angular momentum of 4.5 billion years still moving the atmosphere through the dark. The wind carries you sideways. You cannot fight it. You let it carry you. Direction has stopped working. On every other planet in this series you had down. Down was the planet. Down was the surface or the center. Down was the direction gravity pulled. Here, floating in the atmosphere in total darkness with wind pushing you sideways, you have lost down. Not because there is no gravity. Uranus has gravity. But without any visual reference, without the ability to see which way the planet is, without even the horizon to tell you where the planet ends and the sky begins, your body cannot orient itself. You are floating in the dark with wind on your left and cold everywhere, and no reliable information about which direction is which. Miranda is somewhere nearby. You cannot see it, everything is dark, and the dark has removed the distinction between nearby and far away. But Miranda is one of Uranus's moons, and it orbits close, about 130,000 kilometers above the cloud tops. At some point in the dark, if the geometry were right, Miranda would be visible as a small point of reflected starlight. Miranda is extraordinary. It is a small moon, only 470 kilometers across, but its surface is the most geologically varied surface in the solar system. Vast plains, ancient cratered terrain, and cliffs. A cliff called Verona Rupes that drops for 20 kilometers. The tallest known cliff in the solar system. 20 kilometers of vertical drop on a moon that is only 470 kilometers across. If you stood at the top of Verona Rupes and dropped a stone, it would fall for 10 minutes before hitting the bottom. The cliff exists because Miranda seems to have been broken apart and reassembled. At some point in the moon's history, an impact or internal stress shattered it into pieces. The pieces fell back together under gravity, but they fell back together wrong. Different regions of the moon with different geological histories ended up next to each other. The ancient cratered plains next to younger smooth terrain, next to ridged and grooved regions that look nothing like any of the others. And at the boundaries between these regions, the cliffs, a moon that was broken and put back together badly, the seams where it was reassembled imperfectly. You think about this in the dark, something being broken and then reassembled with the pieces slightly wrong, the evidence of the break still visible. And the moon continuing its orbit anyway, carrying its strange geology and its enormous cliffs, doing what moons do despite the history written into its surface. Miranda has been orbiting Uranus for billions of years, broken and reassembled and still going. The 5 large moons of Uranus are all named after characters from Shakespeare and Alexander Pope. Miranda from The Tempest, Ariel and Umbriel from The Rape of the Lock, Titania and Oberon from A Midsummer Night's Dream. This makes Uranus the only planet in the solar system whose major moons are named after literary characters rather than figures from mythology. Somewhere in the dark around you, literary moons are orbiting a planet that rotates on its side. The solar system contains these facts simultaneously and asks no one's permission to be strange. You cannot see the color of Uranus right now, but it is there. The atmosphere around you is blue-green, a pale cyan, the specific shade produced by methane absorbing the red end of the spectrum and reflecting everything else. It is one of the more beautiful colors in the solar system, and you are completely surrounded by it, and you cannot see it because there is no light here to make colors visible. Color requires light, not to exist, Color exists as a property of matter, regardless of whether light is present to reveal it. The methane around you is absorbing and reflecting wavelengths of light, regardless of whether there is any light to absorb and reflect. The property that makes Uranus blue-green is present in the atmosphere at this moment. The color is real. It is simply invisible. This is true of everything around you. The rings of Uranus are here. Narrow, dark rings, nothing like Saturn's, barely visible, even in good light, but real. 9 main rings of dark material orbiting the planet. Right now they are in the dark with everything else, invisible, continuing their orbits. The moons are orbiting. The wind is blowing. The cold is at -224 degrees. All of this is happening. All of it is real. None of it is visible. The polar winter of Uranus removes the visual world completely. What remains is a planet of pure physics, pressure and temperature and wind and gravity, all operating in the dark, all doing what they have always done, needing no light to continue, requiring no observer. You are the observer. You are observing with everything except your eyes. The cold tells you where you are, and the wind tells you the planet is moving. The pressure tells you the depth of the atmosphere. Your own breathing tells you the time. One breath at a time, each one a small expenditure. In 42 years, the sun will return to this pole. The darkness will end gradually, the way darkness always ends at a pole. Not a sudden sunrise, but a slow brightening over weeks and months as the sun creeps above the horizon and then climbs higher and stays longer until eventually it is circling the sky without setting, the polar day. The blue-green atmosphere will glow in the returning light. The rings will be visible. The moons will be visible. Everything that is here right now in the dark will be revealed to be exactly where it has been all along. The 42-year night will end and the 42-year day will begin, and the planet will continue its strange tilted journey around the sun, as it has for 4.5 billion years. The cold is the question. You are inside the question now. The coldest atmosphere in the solar system, on a planet that should not be the coldest. Neptune is further away. Neptune should win this category. Neptune loses this category, and the reason is the mystery. Scientists have a theory. The theory involves a collision. Early in the solar system, something large struck Uranus, perhaps a protoplanet, perhaps an object with the mass of several Earths. The collision tilted Uranus onto its side, and the collision may have done something to the planet's interior as well, disrupted the internal heat flow in some way that prevented Uranus from radiating the heat that all the other large planets radiate. But the theory is incomplete. The models do not fully explain the data. The internal structure of Uranus, which is thought to consist of a rocky core surrounded by water, methane, and ammonia ice under enormous pressure, and then the hydrogen and helium atmosphere above, should behave in ways that allow heat to escape. The fact that it does not escape, or escape so slowly, suggests something else is happening that is not yet understood. Perhaps a layer of something is acting as an insulating barrier. Perhaps the composition is different from what the models assume. Perhaps the collision did something that physics does not yet have a complete description for. Uranus does not explain itself. It simply is what it is. Cold, tilted, dark at its poles for decades at a time, moving through its orbit at the edge of the visible solar system, unreachable and unvisited since 1986. You are the only visitor. You are inside the mystery. The mystery does not resolve because you are here. The mystery continues. Uranus was the first planet discovered with a telescope. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all visible to the naked eye, all known since ancient times, all named in antiquity. Uranus was found in 1781 by William Herschel, who at first thought it was a comet. He kept watching. It moved too slowly for a comet. Its shape was wrong for a comet. He eventually concluded it was a planet. The first new planet discovered in recorded history. The solar system was suddenly twice as large as it had been the day before. People alive in 1781 went to bed knowing of 6 planets and woke up knowing of 7. What it felt like to be William Herschel at the moment of that realization, sitting at his telescope, watching this faint blue-green disk moving against the stars, is not something that can be recovered now. But the planet he found is here. You are in it. Time is difficult. On the other planets, there was something to measure time by. On Mercury, there was the shadow line moving. On Mars, there was the temperature swinging, the storm arriving, the sunset. On Saturn, there were the ice pieces drifting past, something to watch, something that moved and changed. Even inside Jupiter, there was the descent, the progression through layers, the sense of going somewhere. Here, there is the dark. The dark is consistent. It does not change. The wind is consistent. It does not significantly vary. The cold is consistent. It has been exactly this cold since you arrived, and will be exactly this cold when you are no longer here to measure it. Without variation, time loses its texture. You know time is passing because your body tells you so. The cold has moved deeper. The breathing has changed. That the small internal calendar of biological processes marks the hours as they go, but the hours feel the same. Each one is dark, each one is cold, each one is the wind from the left and the stars barely visible above, and the blue-green you cannot see all around you. You think about people who have spent long times in darkness, miners trapped underground, explorers in polar winter, people in sensory deprivation experiments. The reports are consistent. Time expands. A day feels like several days. A few hours can feel like a week. The brain, receiving no new information from the visual world, begins to elaborate on what it has, generates its own content. The boundary between memory and present experience softens. You are aware of this happening. But you are aware that some of what you are experiencing right now is the dark, and some of it is what the dark produces in a brain that has been without light for a long time. The distinction matters less than you thought it would. Both are real. You think about the Voyager 2 photographs, the ones taken in 1986 as the spacecraft flew past. Uranus from outside looks almost featureless, a pale blue-green sphere with no visible storms, no visible bands, no dramatic weather systems on the surface. Just a smooth blue-green ball. Scientists were surprised. They expected to see structure, the kind of banding visible on Jupiter and Saturn. Instead, they saw almost nothing, a planet with an interior more mysterious than its appearance suggested. The inside of Uranus contains things that the outside does not reveal. You are inside it now. You can confirm this. Uranus is called an ice giant, not because its surface is ice, not because you would encounter ice if you reached down into it. The ice and ice giant refers to the composition of the planet's interior, which is thought to consist primarily of water, methane, and ammonia in a high-pressure state that is technically a fluid rather than ice, but that has the chemical composition of ices. Below where you are floating, the atmosphere gives way to this. At some depth, the gas becomes something denser, then denser still. The water and methane and ammonia under the extreme pressure of the planet's interior behave in ways that these substances do not behave at normal pressures. They may conduct electricity. They may form exotic chemical compounds. The deep interior of Uranus is doing things that cannot currently be replicated in any laboratory on Earth. Below the ice layer, there may be a rocky core, dense and hot and buried beneath tens of thousands of kilometers of ice and atmosphere. The core of Uranus may be the size of Earth. It may be mostly iron and silicate rock. Its temperature may be thousands of degrees, and yet that heat, for reasons not understood, does not reach the surface. The core keeps its warmth to itself. You are floating above all of this. The cold, featureless, tilted, mysterious planet that nobody visits, that only one spacecraft has ever seen up close, that rotates on its side and spends its pole in 42 years of darkness, contains within it a hot, rocky core and an interior of exotic compressed ices and an atmosphere of methane and hydrogen and helium. All of it doing what it has been doing for 4.5 billion years, without an audience. Until now, the name Uranus is the only planetary name in English that is pronounced differently from how it looks. This is a small fact, a trivial fact, but you think about it in the dark because in the dark the mind goes to things it would not normally go to, small facts that have been sitting in the back of the brain for years without being retrieved. Uranus, the seventh planet, named after the Greek god of the sky, the father of Saturn, the grandfather of Jupiter, the oldest of the Titans, overthrown by his own children, like so many parents in mythology. His name attached to this cold, tilted, forgotten planet at the edge of the visible solar system, rolling through the dark on its side. The cold is very deep now, past the point where the body reports it as a specific sensation, and into the point where the body simply operates at the temperature it has reached, slower than before, managing what it can manage. The wind is still from the left, 900 kilometers per hour of cold, dense atmosphere, pushing you through the dark as it has been pushing you since you arrived. You have traveled a significant distance since you opened your eyes here. Not that direction means anything in the dark. Not that distance means anything without landmarks. You are somewhere in the dark atmosphere of Uranus. That is the most accurate description of your location that is possible. You look up at the stars. They are still there, faint through the atmosphere but present. The same stars that are above every planet in this solar system. And the same stars that were above you when you were on Mercury, when you were on Venus, when you watched the blue Martian sunset and the great red spot and the rings of Saturn. The same stars, slightly different angles, slightly different brightness, the same ancient fires in the same ancient positions. The sun is out there. You cannot see it. It is behind the planet from your position, but it is there. The same sun that was enormous and overwhelming on Mercury, that was filtering through Venus's acid clouds, that was small and far away on Mars, that was a bright star in the rings of Saturn. Here it is behind the planet. Here its light does not reach this hemisphere, but it burns. The cold is past where the breathing usually goes. Your breathing is very slow. The dark is the same dark it has always been here. The wind is the same wind. The temperature is the same temperature. Uranus is consistent. Uranus does not notice the difference between the moments when you are here and the moments when you are not. That is not a cruelty. That is just what Uranus is. A planet, cold and dark and tilted and strange, going around the sun in its own time. In 42 years the sun will rise here. The darkness will end. The blue-green atmosphere will glow in the light. The rings and the moons will be visible. Everything that has been invisible will be revealed, and there will be nothing here to see it. The atmosphere will simply be lit. The planet will continue. No record will be kept of the darkness, except in the physics, in the temperature of the ice at this pole that will slowly warm under the returning sun, yet in the atmospheric chemistry that will shift slightly as sunlight drives reactions. It could not drive in the dark. The planet will record the end of the darkness in the way that planets record things, in physics and chemistry and the slow movement of matter, not in memory, not in language. You have been here for a few hours. The night has been here for years. These are both true simultaneously. The planet does not distinguish between the darkness that was here before you arrived and the darkness that arrived with you. The darkness is simply the condition. It has been the condition. It will be the condition. The few hours of your presence in this darkness are not a unit that Uranus uses for measurement. Uranus measures in years. Uranus measures in decades, the 42-year seasons, the 84-year orbit, the 4.5 billion years since formation. These are Uranus's units. You arrived, and the planet did not mark it. You will leave, and the planet will not mark that either. The wind will keep blowing at 900 kilometers per hour. The cold will remain at negative 224 degrees. The dark will continue for the years remaining in this polar night. And you were here for a few of those hours. You felt the wind and the cold, and the specific disorientation of floating in a dark with no visual reference. You looked at the faint stars above and thought about Miranda with its 20-kilometer cliff, and about Herschel at his telescope in 1781, and about the 6 hours of Voyager 2, and about the 42-year night still running and still running and still running above you and below you and in every direction. You were here. The dark does not require confirmation of this. The dark simply is, and you were in it, and you are still in it, and the cold is very complete, and the stars are very faint, and the wind is still from the left. Close your eyes. The dark was very complete. The wind was very cold. The night has 42 more years to run. For a few hours of it. A note of science. Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun, and the 3rd largest in the solar system by diameter. It is classified as an ice giant, along with Neptune, to distinguish it from the gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn. Its interior is thought to consist primarily of water, methane, and ammonia under extreme pressure, surrounding a small rocky core. Uranus has an axial tilt of approximately 98 degrees. This means it rotates almost on its side relative to its orbit around the Sun. The cause of this extreme tilt is not known with certainty, but the leading theory is that a large object struck Uranus early in the solar system's history, knocking it over. Each pole receives about 42 years of continuous sunlight, followed by 42 years of continuous darkness over the course of Uranus's 84-year orbit. The atmosphere of Uranus is the coldest of any planet in the solar system, reaching approximately negative 224 degrees Celsius. This is colder than Neptune's atmosphere, despite Neptune being further from the Sun. Uranus radiates very little internal heat compared to other gas and ice giants, for reasons that are not fully understood. Neptune, by contrast, radiates significantly more heat than it receives from the Sun. Uranus has 13 known rings. They are narrow and dark, made of dust and small rocks rather than the bright ice that makes Saturn's rings visible. The rings were discovered in 1977 when astronomers watched Uranus pass in front of a distant star and noticed the star's light flickering before and after the planet blocked it. Uranus has 27 known moons. The 5 largest are Miranda, Ariel, Umbriel, Titania, and Oberon. All Uranian moons are named after characters from the works of William Shakespeare and Alexander Pope. Miranda is notable for having the tallest known cliff in the solar system, Verona Rupes, which drops approximately 20 kilometers. Voyager 2 is the only spacecraft to have visited Uranus. It flew past in January 1986, during its grand tour of the outer solar system. The encounter lasted approximately 6 hours. The images and data returned by Voyager 2 remain the only close-up observations of Uranus ever made. As of 2026, no follow-up mission has visited Uranus, though several have been proposed. Uranus was discovered by William Herschel on March 13, 1781. It was the first planet discovered with a telescope, and the first planet discovered in recorded history. Herschel initially classified it as a comet, but eventually determined it was a planet. He initially proposed naming it Georgium Sidus, after King George III of England. The name Uranus, suggested by other astronomers, was eventually adopted. Next, Neptune.